career out of, part of your career, outing bad science, misinformation where you find it. When did it start to bother you?
I think like anybody who works in medicine or science, it's very obvious to me that what you see in the media is very frequently complete nonsense. And I think, there's nothing sort of special about what I did. I just gave a mouthpiece to the dissatisfaction of a huge number of disgruntled nerds.
Your new book tackles everything from dodgy mental exercises, cosmetics, homeopathy, nutrition, right through to dubious tactics of mainstream medicine. What practices or areas worry you most in terms of the damage that can do to people?
I'm not so concerned about the direct harms of bad science. I'm more concerned about the fact that people just don't understand the basics of evidence-based medicine. Evidence-based medicine it's the science of how we know if something's good for us or bad for us, and there's obviously a huge passion for that kind of information. Half of all science stories in mainstream media are about health, and most of that is about what's good for you or bad for you, and yet the basics of evidence-based medicine, of epidemiology and medical statistics, which really aren't difficult, as I show in the book, aren't taught in schools. There's never really been a proper exhibit on them in the Science Museum, and the people who tell us about them, namely journalists and for the most part quacks, get things not just a bit half-cocked, but often demonstrably completely wrong.
Have you got any examples to hand of the most outrageous
How many do you want?
sins of the media in this way?
Well, obviously MMR is the paradigmatic example of a hoax story effectively in the media. And I mean that as, the media's hoax rather than Andrew Wakefield's. Andrew Wakefield was one academic who, he's perfectly entitled to be wrong about whether MMR causes autism. But his tiny 12-subject case series report was overstated and turned into the world's biggest ever molehill by the British news media collectively, whilst at the same time ignoring all countervailing evidence. That was a truly extraordinary episode, both in terms of what it can teach you about the basics of epidemiology, but also in terms of what it can show you about how far the media will go in selectively editing out bits of information in order to concoct a scare story.
Was this a one-of-a-kind, or is this the sort of thing that the media does consistently?
No, that's just the most extreme and most recent example. As I show in the book, another interesting example was the MRSA sort of undercover positive swab for MRSA stories that were big in the media about 3 or 4 years ago. Those were all false positives from one bogus laboratory producing false positive results, and as I show in the book, the journalists concerned basically knew that because they were telling each other to go to this laboratory when they weren't managing to get positive results from proper laboratories. And when it was finally inspected by the government's inspector of microbiology, the report is it's very diplomatic. It says it was a single-storey wooden structure in the grounds surrounding a domestic property. It was a garden shed, and it was a garden shed with kitchen fittings being run by a man with a mail-order PhD from America. And he was, according to journalists, the lab that always gives positive results. It's bizarre.